So, Peter, thank you so much for coming on today. But maybe just to set some context, could you briefly explain maybe your background and also Nozawa Hospitality as it is today? And then we'll dive into the details in between.
Okay. Well, Kalani, thanks for the opportunity. So my name is Peter Douglas. I'm British. I am 60 something. When am I? 62, I think. No, not. I'm 61. And I born and sort of raised, I guess, in the UK, but I spent most of my adult life overseas. Japan for 3 years in the 1980s. A year in France studying. 21 over years in Singapore, and now 8 years in Japan. Most of my career I spent in the asset management industry, initially the conventional industry, managing mutual funds for folks, and then for 15 years I ran my own consulting business in Asia and did a lot of work with industry groups, etc. And then for all sorts of reasons, which I guess we shall go into, decided to do something completely different. Nozawa Hospitality now is a accommodations business, so we own and operate various different types of accommodations, from really simple kind of one-bedroom apartments through to super high-end hotels, all in Nozawa Onsen, which is a mountain resort in the north of Nagano on the main island of Japan.
Yeah, so how the change from finance to hospitality, and also geographically. You said you mentioned you had a bit of time in Japan, but yeah.
So geographically, I've always had a bit of touch with Japan, and through my kind of work in the finance business, I would visit Tokyo frequently. So moving to Japan actually wasn't, it didn't really feel like a big change, and it felt like a very from a kind of lifestyle and personal point of view, it felt very natural. And Singapore, wonderful place to run a knowledge business, great place to bring up my kids, but with all due respect, it's not really a real place. And where you come to Japan, and it's everything that Singapore isn't. So that bit felt very natural. You can always explain any sort of life change with supreme backward-looking rationality, but basically it was kind of serendipity. Through my hedge fund research business, I became very good friends with a Singapore-based hedge fund manager who made vast amounts of money in the Lehman shock, and decided he wanted to set up a family office. So a family office, as you know, is basically an investment management organization that only has one client. And he asked me to run that for him. So this was going back 12, 13 years. So I started to run that. We made all sorts of investments in all sorts of industries, in all sorts of weird and wonderful parts of the world, with a normal distribution of outcomes. So some worked really well, most did more or less what they were supposed to do, and some didn't. One of those investments was in Japan here, and the thesis then was no more than Japanese real estate looks cheap. What could make it expensive? And at that point, the only obvious segment that we could see was inbound tourism. Japan has always felt like absolute tourist heaven, but back then there was like 2 or 3 million tourists a year coming in. It made no sense. So we wanted to be in the hospitality industry. We looked at Niseko as a proof of concept that you could build a business purely on inbound business. We didn't particularly want to be in Niseko for all sorts of reasons. We did lots of desk work. We chose Nozawa. We bought some properties. And in glorious naivety, we thought we'd buy a few properties, we pay somebody to run them, and we sit back and we collect the checks. Couldn't be easier. Yeah, so that didn't work so well. So I gradually got more and more involved trying to make the thing work. And then got rather tired of the monthly commute between Singapore and but nowhere Naganog, and realized that actually from a personal life stage point of view, this move made sense. As I mentioned, it felt kind of emotionally right, made total sense from a business point of view. So I basically moved full-time here and full-time into managing this business. So it was a complete change, but in some ways it was very osmotic, and it felt absolutely right. I mean, 30 years is a long time to be in any one industry. And financial services is an intellectually stimulating and pretty intense game. And you don't want to be the old guy in the corner who used to know what he was talking about. So, there's a, the secret of a long life is knowing when it's time to go.
Yeah, that's true. So how did skills transfer across? How much was a fresh start, and how steep was the learning curve? How'd you find it?
Learning curve was like, well, vertical. It's kind of like if you're into bouldering, it's more like an overhang than vertical. Well, so what was the transferable skill set? Well, transferable skill set was running a small business. That's pretty much the same as everywhere else. Dealing with people, trying to get a fairly random bunch of people to work as a team. So it's a very general kind of, small business skills. Everything else was a learning curve. Know nothing about the hospitality business, knew nothing about the real estate business, never run a business in Japan, never had to run a business in a foreign language. You keep the list coming. But actually, I mean, from a very selfish point of view, that was great, because it means that every day is an intellectual challenge. So it's actually very refreshing in a way. Not sure it was quite so wonderful for my shareholder, but
I was going to say, and you're looking good, Nick, for your 60s, but most people are retiring. You've sort of cracked in, had a new start. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, it drives me nuts. People I know in the sort of financial services industry go, "Oh yeah, Pete's retired to a ski resort in Japan," and it's like, "Oh, well, I'm working harder than I ever worked before." Yeah, we live in this very sort of traditional rural Japanese community, and the philosophy really is, if you stop working, you're basically just waiting to die. So you might as well carry on working.
Yeah, totally agree. And yeah, given it's a relatively small community, but you've got 15 plus properties, and the whole community is just over 3,000 residents. So how is it actually running the largest accommodation provider in the village? What's that like?
So first of all, I'm not sure we are necessarily the largest. Genuinely haven't counted. Maybe we are, maybe we aren't. So this place has been a vacation destination for 250 years. It was a summer resort for folks from the cities because it's in the mountains, it's cooler. And then 100 and something years ago, they started skiing, so they became a ski resort. So there's a long history of welcoming guests here, and there's well over 200 accommodations in the village. So, we may be one of the largest, but we by no means dominate. So yeah, we're nowhere close to a monopoly. I guess we have to, or I think anyway, maybe I'm doing it right, maybe I'm not, but what I think is we have to work very hard to integrate and be part of the community. We're outsiders, and we've been made very welcome. It's actually surprisingly a very good business environment here, but we're outsiders. A lot of our local friends and neighbors are fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth generation residents. Obviously I didn't go to primary school with anybody, so we have to be very careful about local relationships. On the whole, that works very well. But what else? Being visible, same as if you're visible in any industry. You've got to be the guy that keeps his nose clean. You can't cut corners. If you're running a sort of one B&B on the street corner, you can a bit more flexible in your interpretation of regulations. We can't do that. Yeah, I mean, the challenges and the objectives and the strategy don't really have much to do with us being big or small. It's much more absolute in the sense that I need to make sure that my shareholder gets a return on his money, that staff are happy. You think the hospitality business is about making guests happy. It's not. It's about making your staff happy. And if that works, your guests will be fine. It's about taking the business from being very winter focused to being year round. When we started, we'd make money in the winter and then try not to lose too much in the summer. So moving to the point where we can make a bit of money year round has been a big challenge. And obviously through the pandemic, where there was no inbound guests at all, wrestling the company to a point where we can attract, service, and make satisfied domestic guests as well. So I guess we'd spend, apart from some community relations and being good neighbours, we actually spend more time looking at our navels rather than thinking about what the outside world is thinking of us.
Yeah, there's a couple of points I want to touch on there, but I'll start with domestic tourism versus foreign tourism. I saw you post on LinkedIn today that 2/3 of tourists there are, Japanese local domestic tourists. But how different are the needs of domestic tourists compared to international? Because I've actually got a mate happens to be going to Nozawa soon. So I was like, I'll ask and see how he goes. So yeah.
Right. Well, you should put him in touch. Buy him a beer. So that's a very smart question. So, and let me start to take it from a slightly different angle. Our business is predicated on making our properties attractive to inbound guests. So, having service that makes sense to an international audience, having properties which are physically comfortable for an inbound audience. What we've found is that when we're looking after Japanese guests, that actually is very attractive for middle-class urban Japanese as well. And like most conclusions, it's blindingly obvious when you think about it. The needs of urban middle-class Japanese are surprisingly similar to the needs of middle-class urban Sydneyites, Singaporeans, Honkies, whatever. So once our Japanese guests are here, I'd like to think they are pretty happy and they keep coming, so I guess they are. The service delivery, there's no way we can be a full-on high-end ryokan, traditional Japanese inn, because we're a bunch of foreigners. But we can provide friendly, flexible, helpful service. So we don't really differentiate too much in the service delivery between Japanese guests and inbound guests. We might have to tweak the breakfasts a bit, that's all. The real difference is in the marketing and the back end. So the channels to reach Japanese guests are very different, both in terms of, we don't do much advertising, but the advertising communication channels, the booking and reservation channels are completely different. Japanese online travel agents work very differently from international online travel agents. That's a whole different skill set. And then the way that Japanese book is different, much more high touch. They require much more information. Japanese websites and information sources tend to be intensely information rich. So it's not just about translating them. And Japanese tend to stay for 1 or 2 nights, whereas inbound guests, because you've made the effort to fly to a different country, you stay for longer. So the economics are different.
Yeah, interesting. Okay. Just one point there. I don't know if you know, but I'll just go on the fly here. Japanese online travel agents, very different. How so? Yeah.
Well, there's a joke amongst long-term Japan residents that the biggest book in Japan is the book of because there are so many questions about why does this happen this way in Japan, and the answer is because. So Partly because going back to the comment about information intensity, the amount of information that you need to upload and keep fresh on something like Rakuten or Jalan is of a different order than what you need to keep live on Booking.com or whoever it may be. And the way that the booking is made is a different premise. So this is a hospitality industry detail. Most of the hospitality industry globally works on booking a hotel room, and it probably says you can get 2 or 3 people in there, but you're charged for the hotel room. Japan, you're charged per person. So the fundamental premise of how the booking goes through is different. And then I'll tell you one interesting thing too. You probably heard about how Japanese technology is a barbell, which is sort of super advanced stuff like robotics and all the rest of it, and some super backward stuff, which is most office technology. So we have one of these OTAs where you as the customer book online through their website or through the app on your phone or whatever, and then they send me a fax to confirm it.
Oh my God.
So yeah, so we basically we have a couple of staff who look after our reservations and revenue management. They need a lot more local support dealing with Japanese distribution. So that really was a cliff to climb, but it's worth it because blindingly obvious comments. It's a big, wealthy country, and we're in it, so we might as well market to them.
Fair enough. I would never know how to send a fax though.
Well, I'd kind of forgotten, but it's like riding a bicycle.
True.
It comes back to you.
And seasonality around your work. So you mentioned from winter focused going to summer. How have you transitioned? Is that a case of marketing, or how have you approached that?
It's a bit of marketing, although I'm not sure that our marketing or any hotel's marketing is particularly effective at getting people to change their travel habits. It's much more holistic that the village generally gets more and more attractive. So Japanese guests have always come here in the summer because it's cooler than the cities. They can walk around in their yukata, their cotton dressing gowns. They can do lots of onsen baths. They can enjoy the kind of rural mountain fields, very different from the city. But the village has been very good at building on that. So the ski resort's main gondola operates for 4 months during the summer, takes people up the mountain. There's a cafe up there. There's nice gardens and stuff to do. And going back to my earlier comment, now urban Japanese who like the idea of coming to a kind of very rustic environment with lots of hot springs, blah, 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 can do all that and still find a dozen places they can get a great coffee, stay in a room that's got an attached bathroom, go out and have meals in half a dozen nice restaurants. So I wish I could say it's just us. It's the village holistically, and obviously we make a bit of an effort. We keep all our properties open through the green season, whereas a lot of the foreign-owned properties kind of don't. It's changing slowly. But yeah, I mean, zooming out to more helicopter level, I mean, one of the reasons that it's a joy running a business here is the place. The village, there's plenty of politics and plenty of people have strong ideas, but basically the village is all shooting in the same direction. The ski resort, the village administration, the accommodation businesses, the F&B businesses. There's lots going on. There's people coming into the village, young people that grew up here, went to the cities, coming back. So that everything kind of reinforces everything else. But we definitely we couldn't do this all on our own.
Yeah. And you mentioned before about keeping staff happy. So one, how do you do that? And two, how do you manage with seasonality of staffing? So how do you approach that?
Yeah. That's a real, well, it's a challenge, but moving to year-end operation also allows you to retain a slightly bigger and hopefully better core team. it's very hard when everything stops at the end of the winter and you've got a standing start in the autumn. Keeping a core team going year round is really helpful. Skills transfer. So when we get our winter staff coming in, there's people that know what they're doing that can train them. Obviously we can service guests who come in the green season, and there's a little bit of kind of slack to do, kind of maintenance and special projects and stuff. But yeah, the seasonality of staff is a big issue. We have 13 staff year round, and we probably, at the moment, I think we have 41 as a winter team. So finding all those people, training them, managing them is probably one of the biggest challenges that my general manager has.
Yeah, and yeah.
I was going to say, I mean, even that is getting a bit easier. As Nozawa Onsen's reputation grows, it's not only more attractive for holiday makers, it's more attractive for people that want to come and experience the season here. So it does get easier. You asked earlier about skills transfer. And one of the things I noticed, when I was managing a team of financial analysts, the more diverse the team, the better the outcome. And it's the same with running a hopefully highly motivated but low skill team in the hospitality business. The more diverse the team, the better the outcome. So we make a conscious effort now to try and get as mixed a team as possible. We've had it back in the day. We probably relied too much on kind of middle class white kids on a working holiday visa, and God bless their little cotton socks, they very often congregate on the lowest common denominator. So right now we have Australians, we have Brits, we have Kiwis, we have Americans, we have some Mongolians. You can find that on a map. We have Taiwanese. Obviously, we have Japanese. So diversity is the only free lunch in management.
Yeah, I've got a few mates doing working holiday visas in snow resorts, and yeah, we do tend to take the piss. Even I'll admit that.
Well, we noticed.
But yeah, so the more diverse the team, the better results. Well, why? Why do you think that is? Maybe.
Yeah, this is pop psychology. I have absolutely no genuine idea. My working assumption is that first of all, you with a knowledge-based team, you have different approaches to a problem, and the more ways you look at a problem, the better solution you get to. And I also suspect there's a little bit of kind of subconscious competition. If you got a dozen of your uni mates from Sydney, it's about who can get drunkest quickest. If you got like a mixed team, the little Chinese bloke doesn't want to be seen as inferior to the rugby playing Aussie. It is pop psychology. Who knows? But it's diversity by age, by cultural background. Social background is huge. Funny enough, I don't think gender and ethnicity are particularly relevant, although they're obviously the Instagrammable ones. So anyway, look, I'm blabbing. I don't really know, but it works.
Yeah, no, fair enough. And with staffing, is it something you've noticed or even been affected by? Is the flight of rural residents to larger cities? Is that something that you've really come across or noticed?
We kind of slightly smugly see it in the other direction. That very noticeably actually, and it's building that local kids who'd gone to work in the cities now see that they can come back. They can afford a nice big house. They got grandpa and grandma there to babysit. Cost of living is diddly what's it, and they can make a good living. So we're getting lots of, in Japanese they're called U-turners. We're also getting I-turners, which is Japanese kids from elsewhere in the world just coming because they think it's a fun place to be. And with lots of young people coming back, it's great dating opportunities, all that stuff. So that's a real thing. And although the village population is still slightly declining because a lot of old people die, it's declining way, way more slowly than it was 10 years ago. The other thing which we're seeing, which we kind of, well, you could have seen coming, and it's surprising that Japan was so slow, is the rise of remote working. There's a nice place to live, so lots of places to get decent coffee. We're just over 2 hours from Tokyo if you need to be there. Gorgeous environment, all the things it says on the brochure, and with pretty much the whole of the Japanese countryside on fiber optic internet, you can work very effectively remotely. So there's got to be 4 or 5 folks who have Tokyo-based or international-based responsibilities that choose to live full-time here. We get a steady stream of people who are coming here for 2, 3, 4, 5 months, doing their thing here, and I think that is going to be such a big thing that's just going to grow and grow.
Yeah. Okay, cool. And you've been at Nozawa Hospitality for a while now, but could you walk me through just how you navigated the past 3 years? So with the pandemic, what were the challenges? What were the solutions? Yeah, you still got your hair, so.
Well, not much of it. Yeah. So look, I mean, I guess we got some stuff right, some stuff wrong. Right at the beginning, a 30-second Google search would tell you that there's no such thing as a 3-month pandemic. Pandemics last years, not months. So first base was to make the decision that crawling under a rock and waiting for a few months wasn't an option. So we had to make some changes. And the main one, as I say, was to pivot from being an international focused business to being domestic. And I think we've done that not perfectly, but reasonably well. We were very lucky to be operating our business in Japan. So very quickly, there was very strong public sector support. So in the first sort of half year of the pandemic, we could furlough a lot of our staff, and the government was paying pretty much everything. We got just direct grants, just here, have some money. We got subsidized loans from the government. I raised a little bit more money from my shareholder. I stopped taking a salary for a year. And the remaining staff we had, we basically put everybody onto sort of maintenance and stuff. So we weren't paying contractors, but we were using our staff. So the first 6 months, we really were ducking and diving. But again, if you're used to running a small business, ducking and diving is what it says on your t-shirt. I had to change my GM. That was the most painful change. We had a very good professional general manager leading the pandemic. However, she was she'd grown up in the hospitality industry. She was quite mature, and clearly was not going to be comfortable ducking and diving. So we brought in a much younger GM with less experience, but who had studied hospitality, who saw it as a huge opportunity. So changing the operational management to very, very flexible, experimental almost approach helped. And then, then the Japanese government supported domestic tourism with various incentive packages. Japan actually managed the pandemic really well. People in mask discipline was pretty much universal. So, a lot of it was just we were in the right place, thank heavens. But interesting experience.
Yeah. Is there anything you'd do differently?
Managing through the pandemic. Well, I mean, I'm sure there's stuff I should have done differently. I can't think of anything that was an obvious landmine we trod on. Well, we also, the other thing I forgot to mention, we also did a very substantial real estate project. We took a 25-room hotel that we owned and we turned it into 8 high-end apartments, which we put up for sale. So that maintained quite a bit of activity, kept some money flowing, and we generated some money from real estate sales,
Wow.
which was helpful. Yeah, no, I don't. I don't think I did everything perfectly by any means, but I can't think of anything I specifically got very wrong. No.
Fair enough. Yeah. And how do you view growth going forward now? How much has that changed? And yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so we're a bit of an interesting case in that, Nozawa Onsen's popularity is growing rapidly. Lots of people are trying to get in. Lots of people are building their businesses here. My shareholder, scrolling back to 12, 13 years ago when we started, took a very scattergun approach to his investments globally. Over the last decade, conversely, he's focused down hugely to a couple of major sectors. And this, to be honest, is a flea bite. It's a tiny part of his portfolio. He has no strategic need to be in Japan. Certainly no strategic need to be in deep rural nowhere Japan. And at some point I would like to head off and do my own thing. So part of my brief is to lighten our balance sheet. So basically he gets his capital back and then some, and move the company to a operation and management business. So basically doing what we do, but increasingly moving to fee-based rather than just selling hotel beds. And that project of taking a big ryokan and turning it into apartments was a way to lighten our balance sheet. Yeah. So probably more of that. So hopefully in 3 or 4 years' time, what I would hope is that we own a lot less real estate than we do. Conversely, we are managing and operating more properties than we do, and that we are even more a year-round business with our revenues increasingly smoothed over the year. That our customer base is much more evenly balanced between domestic and inbound, and that the composition of that inbound is probably going to be more like 2/3 Asian middle class, 1/3 Australian long haul, I suspect. Yeah.
So you mentioned you head off. Where do you want to go? What do you want to do after this? Maybe.
Well, I'm physically not moving anywhere. This is home. I'm not going anywhere. But separately from Nozawa Hospitality, my family owns a hotel here, which my wife operates. That's a pretty good business, so we could perfectly comfortably develop that, or I don't know, do something completely different. But this is home. I'm absolutely not going anywhere.
Yeah, living a good life. I'm very jealous, I'll admit.
We live up the mountain, so the village is at 600 meters. The top of the mountain is 700. We live about 1,200 meters, about 2/3 of the way up the mountain. So yeah, I really do kind of live the mountain life, and I absolutely love it.
Yeah, yeah, very good. And is there anything we haven't talked about today that's consequential about the future of Nozawa Hospitality, in your opinion?
Not about the company. I think the future of the village generally is very interesting. So you would come here, there's 600 over ski resorts in Japan. And most of them are probably not worth more than an hour or two. There's probably 15 or 20 which you would consider as a destination, as an inbound traveler. You would choose Nozawa, I think, because it is a mountain village, because it has this long history, because it has a very distinct culture. So what I think is crucial for the village is it maintains that, but with growing popularity, more people are coming in, more people investing, and everybody who invests has their own vision of how it should be. So the challenge for the village is to keep its character. And that could go either way. I'm on balance optimistic. It's actually quite a wealthy village, so the wherewithal, both in some of the families' pockets here and at the village level, the wherewithal is there to put some teeth behind strategies to keep the village doing what it's doing. It's a very sporting village. Out of 3,400 residents, there are 14 Olympians, and heaven knows how many international national athletes, which means that a surprising proportion of the village, when they were younger, competed against us white people and probably beat us. So there's no kind of, there's a certain sort of confidence about the village, and it's, has a reputation in this region for being very commercial. So I think it's got the tools to keep its culture and tradition, but that's absolutely the challenge. It's going to get a lot more expensive. It's a small village. You can't expand up the mountain because it's inside the ski resort and some of it's public land. You can't expand down because that's rice fields, and it's almost impossible to rezone a rice field. So it's a bit of a pressure cooker. It's going to get more expensive. How it manages that while continuing to provide accommodation for young people, I think is an interesting challenge. So it's not about us. It's about the village.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay. So I'm very conscious of your time, so I'll get into my closing round of more personal questions, if that's cool with you. Most undervalued life experience that university age students don't give weight to. So what's an underrated skill or an experience that you think either they should have, or something you wish you had back in the day?
I've been thinking about, actually, funny enough, I was talking about this with my wife this morning. I think the most valuable life experience that I had, I was a complete layabout as a kid. After I graduated from high school, I basically bummed around Europe doing odd jobs and not much really for 2 years before I went to university. Totally unstructured, didn't look particularly great on the CV. And when I finally went to university, I was a bit disjointed because there was all these kind of fresh scrub middle class kids, and there was I kind of grungy traveller. But actually having a bit of totally unstructured time when you're younger to work out who you are, invaluable. And over the years, with hindsight, it's been very powerful. And you have to have years of hindsight to see that. So I think, the most undervalued experience for young people is actually to create unstructured, unsupervised, unmanaged time and space, just to sort of lose yourself and find yourself again.
Yeah, love that
philosophical.
No, serendipity is good.
Yeah. What else I think is sort of important? Apart from you look, if you know yourself, then you don't have to ask anybody else that question because you know the answer. For me, life needs to be interesting. It's always been about the intellectual fascination. Keep learning, make sure new things keep happening in your life. But for some people, everybody's different.
Yeah. I still love that. And for you, any books or even people that have been influential in shaping your worldview?
Oh gosh, I used to read books voraciously when I was younger, and I've kind of gone out of habit. Okay, shaping my worldview. Well, part of my kind of unstructured time, I read far too much Hermann Hesse. Steppenwolf and the Glass Bead Game, all that good stuff. And all the books that defined my kind of generation. So Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. I worked nights in a petrol station for a while, gave me a chance to read War and Peace. I've always read fiction. I'm very proud of never having read a business book end to end, which you never need to, by the way. Any business book, you read the preface, you know what it's going to say the rest of the time. So other books that have been powerful. No, that's about it on books. People, yeah, my mother passed away when I was a teenager, but she was an extraordinary woman. Her parents were in service, so basically they were a chauffeur and a maid for a big family in London. She decided she wanted to go to Oxford, and they basically disowned her because that wasn't what working class kids did.
Wow.
And then she built a career while being a single mother, which in that generation was pretty out there. My very first boss, when I started work, a guy called Audley Twiston Davis, who was, and I think he wouldn't be upset if I mentioned, yeah, he's thick as a brick, but commercially super successful. And whenever I get stuck in a business problem, I think, what would Audley do?
Yeah.
You know? So going back to your question about the pandemic, one of his favorite sayings was, look, when you have no idea what to do, for God's sake, do something. Which is just the best bit of business advice possible, because it may or may not be right, but just making a decision empowers you. You know, whereas sitting around going, I have no idea, you feel you're the victim. He also said there are some lunches after which you should not go back to the office, but that's different. So Audley was, and then not a bit of music. Whenever I get to kind of life inflection points, there's an album which I only ever listen to at life inflection points, called Trout Mask Replica by a 1970s, 80s, I guess, musician called Captain Beefheart. It's a very difficult piece of music, but I always listen to that when, not from a business point of view, but from a personal point of view. I've got things I need to think about and decide. What are the big influences? No, I mean, going back to your earlier question, though, thinking about it, I've never really had a mentor for any sort of consistent period of time, and I think I would have liked to have done. You know, if you can find somebody in your industry, in your company, in your circle, whatever, who is prepared to invest in you as a consistent mentor, very, very useful. It's like the Japanese word for teacher, sensei, just means somebody who's lived before you.
Yeah.
That would have been kind of helpful.
Yeah, learn from their mistakes, see their path. Yeah. Interesting answer. I love that one. And you're just curious, how did you end up in Asia? Was there a natural curiosity there, or family, friends?
No, that was utter serendipity. So I started. So I finished university. I needed a job, but I didn't want to go straight into it. I didn't do the in the UK you call it the milk round. So you finish university, lots of companies come on campus. The idea is they hire you and you're done. I didn't feel like doing that, so I went and backpacked around Latin America for a bit until the money ran out, and came back to London. Needed a job, I worked selling insurance. Yeah, it's not really a job, is it? I mean, you force people to buy stuff they don't need, and you get paid a commission. But I then, so I was applying for a regular job, and I applied for a job with a unit trust company, not knowing what a unit trust company was. Turns out that there's a fund management company that just acquired a unit trust company, and therefore they didn't know what unit trusts were about. But they looked at my resume and it said financial marketing. So they thought, oh, he's our man. And they said they'd give me a car. So that was a done deal. Anyway, I realized over the ensuing couple of years, I was a terrible salesman and I really needed to do something else. And I had planned to leave the company and ride my motorbike down to the Sierra Nevada in Spain and write poetry. and I had it all organized, the cottage booked and everything. And then my then managing director called me into his office and said, young Douglas, you know this joint venture that we're doing in Japan? And I lied and I said yes. So, well, we'd like you to go out there. And they had promised their Japanese joint venture partners that they would send somebody out there to be the international face. And they had a Japanese equities fund manager, spoke Japanese, studied Japanese at Oxford, and then she got pregnant, decided she wanted to have a baby in London. So I was spared. So I went out to Japan knowing absolutely zippo. I knew these guys made great motorbikes and they didn't always cook their fish. That was it, really. So yeah, every day was one of those vertical learning curves. It was quite exceptional.
That's unreal.
So that was it.
I love that.
That's the real story. Yeah.
Yeah. Just got to be open to it. Say yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So it was serendipity. I mean, I was just gagging for a change, and this one came along. It was definitely a change, and it was going to pay money, and why not?
What more do you need? Yeah. Wow.
And here I am.
That's unreal. Thank you so much for today. This has been like unreal. I'm going to be thinking about this for a long time. So yeah. Lastly, what do you want to plug? Where can people find you? Anything you want to add?
Oh, people find me in Nozawa Onsen. One of my children a while back wrote a postcard saying Peter Douglas, Nozawa Onsen, Japan, and it reached me.
That's what you need.
That's probably all you need. Yeah, Nozawa Hospitality is a company. My name is Peter Douglas. You'll probably find me lurking on LinkedIn. Yeah, you'll find me.
Easy enough. Cheers. Awesome. Thank you so much for today.
Thank you, Carl. I enjoyed it. Much appreciated.